So in this lesson, I would just like to finish what the different gametes look like, the sperm cells and the egg cells, and then we're going to look at menstruation in women. Okay, so the first thing is here we have a human sperm called a spermatozoa, menselijke sperm, spermatozoa. So this guy, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, it has a head area, a middle area, and a tail area. So just by the way, you guys must be able to sketch a sperm cell. So usually this, again, sketches can be either 5 marks or 4 marks. You have to have a heading for your sketch, so meaning sketch of a sperm cell or whatever you want to call it. You must show at least 2 labels, 2 or 3 labels, depending on what they want. Always give 3 just to be sure. And they want to see that the image that you sketched does indeed look like a sperm. So then you get your next mark. So either 4 or 5 marks usually. So the head part itself, and it is very important, there's an area called the acrosome. And the acrosome actually has specific enzymes on the inside. Later on, when we talk about fertilization, we will see that the acrosome is actually very important because this is the area that firstly penetrates the egg cell during fertilization. And the acrosome, the enzymes on the inside, it actually eats away at the outside layer of the egg cell. So without the acrosome, a sperm can't penetrate an egg cell. That is very, very vital. It's important because the enzymes will open up the egg cell so that the rest of the sperm cell and the DNA on the inside of the head actually gets into the egg cell. That's the point of fertilization. So as I just mentioned here, it has a nucleus, and inside your nucleus there will be DNA. Okay, so die kopgedeelte van die sperm het 'n akrosoom. Die akrosoom het hierdie ensiem aan die binnekant wat baie belangrik is om die omhulsel van jou eierselletjie oop te vreet of te verwyder, sodat die DNA wat binne jou nukleus is, binne die eiersel kan ingaan. Want jy ons sê, die 23 kromosome van die spermsel moet dan nou basies bygevoeg word by die 23 kromosome van die eiersel, sodat jy 'n diploïde organisme kan hê. So again, you want the 23 chromosomes of the sperm cell to enter the egg cell and fuse with the 23 chromosomes of the egg cell. Okay, so that's the head part. So please remember the acrosome and the nucleus with the DNA. Then we have a midsection or a middle piece, and very, very important, in your middle piece or mid piece, you've got mitochondria. And if you guys can remember, the function of mitochondria is to give energy to the cell. Without the mitochondria, this little guy would not be able to swim. So in Afrikaans benoem ons dit net die nekgedeelte, die nek. En binne die nekgedeelte het ons baie mitochondria, want die mitochondria gee energie vir die spermselletjie om te kan swem. And then obviously you need the energy, but you can't swim anyway without a tail. So then we have a tail area, also called a flagellum. So the flagellum is just a fancy word for the tail. So this is what enables the sperm to swim around, to move around. So dit is die staartgedeelte of die flagellum gedeelte. En ja, jy het energie nodig van die mitochondria, maar jy het ook die staart self nodig, want help nie, die dingetjie het energie en hy kan nie die energie gebruik vir enigiets nie, hy moet kan swem. Okay, so in a nutshell, basically, guys, this is what the sperm cell looks like. And again, you must be able to sketch this, guy. It's definitely not rocket science. It's very, very easy and quick to sketch it. Just remember at least 3 or 4 of these labels. Okay, then we move on to the human egg cell or ovum, the egg cell. And this guy is actually very fascinating. As you guys can see, it looks like a normal cell. This is kind of what we picture when we think of the cell. The cell, and it also has a nucleus on the inside with its DNA, 23 chromosomes. It has the cytoplasm on the inside here, and we generally ignore any other organelles or anything on the inside. We can basically just see the cytoplasm and the nucleus for the inside. So the nucleus, waar al die DNA is, 23 chromosome, en ook die cytoplasma, hierdie vloeistofagtige binnekant van die cel, cytoplasma. And then we have 2 membranes specifically. So this first area is called the zona pellucida, and it's basically a jelly layer. Right here, thick jelly layer right around here for protection of the egg cell, zona pellucida. Usually you don't have to give this name, you can just say it's the jelly layer because mostly nobody can remember the name zona pellucida. Although if you say it fast a couple of times, it's quite easy to remember. But you can just say jelly layer or the jelly coat, die jelly laagie in Afrikaans. And then we have the corona radiata, or just the follicular cells. So this is part of the follicle when it was developing. So die folliculêre selle. So usually when you skate it, guys, you actually don't have to show, my mouse doesn't want to work, the corona radiata. You can just draw the nucleus, show the cytoplasm, and show the membrane around here, but make it a double membrane, because the fact that it's a jelly layer makes it double membrane, because here's a membrane and there's a membrane. This entire jelly thing is like a second membrane. And the point of this, again, the two layers is for extra protection, the corona radiata as well. And this is the area where the sperm cell must get through. So again, without the acrosome, technically the acrosome eats away at these cell layers, and also it eats away at the jelly layer. So as soon as the acrosome, the enzymes, has done its job, the nucleus of the sperm cell can enter into the egg cell, and they fuse together here, and then first go through meiosis, and then they go through mitosis. So please remember nucleus, cytoplasm, and at least the jelly layer, or the zona pellucida. So usually for the egg cell, they have asked you guys in the past to actually draw it. And yes, as well, same thing, could be 4 marks, it could be 5 marks. Please remember your heading. Don't throw that away. Okay, then we move on to menstruation. So your menstrual cycle, I'm pretty sure everybody always has questions about this, so I'll try and think of obvious questions and answer in the video. If you still have questions, please WhatsApp me or ask me later on if you guys have queries about what's happening. Okay, so usually this represents what happens during a month. Okay, day 1, and usually your menstruation or the cycle, the month cycle, lasts 28 days. And yes, you guys have to remember the amount of days. They do ask this usually. Okay, so usually at day 1 to around day 7 or day 8, depending on the person, sometimes it's a little bit longer, you have menstruation. So this is literally the menstruation of the menstruation cycle is just in the beginning of the month. Again, not necessarily meaning the 1st of March and it ends the 28th of March. It depends from woman to woman when day 1 of her month is going to be. So what happens during menstruation, again, here you've got the endometrium lining all around here, that thick area with the bloody thick tissue, that eventually this is where you want implantation to happen of the zygote. So this is where the baby will develop in this area. So it must have blood so that the baby can have blood supply while it's developing. And again, sorry, I'm using the word baby, but I mean the fetus, or first the embryo, then the fetus as it is developing. Okay, so then you get the shedding. So this usually happens for around 7 to 10 days. So just this area is called the menstruation area of the menstruation cycle. Then usually the next phase we get is called the follicular phase. So during this time, the endometrium lining becomes thicker. Here we can see there's blood left on the inside, but here it becomes thicker on the inside. So this literally the body is preparing itself for implantation in case fertilization has happened. Then in the middle of the month, smack bang in the middle, usually between days 15 and 17, we have ovulation or ovulasi. So basically what happens during ovulation is that the egg cell comes from the ovary through the fallopian tube and is released into the uterus. And again, if within 24 hours or maybe 48 hours, if fertilization does not happen, I need my mouse. If fertilization doesn't happen and implantation doesn't happen, it just simply comes through and then it exits the body after 48 hours or so on. So after ovulation, this phase, you get the luteal phase. And in this phase, again, the endometrium lining is just getting thicker and thicker. So nothing here happened to it. It just, for the rest of the month, becomes thick, thick, thick. Here it should be around ready to be thick enough for implantation, but then it becomes even more thicker and more thicker. And then here by day 28, you go back to day 21, and then if there was no implantation, you shed the endometrium lining again. So then again, same thing for the next month, so we go on. Okay, so you guys have to remember the different phase names. So menstruation happens first 7 days. Follicular phase, where the egg cell develops. Ovulation, the releasing of the egg cell, and then your luteal phase, which refers to one of the hormones that works in on this phase. So then it means just the endometrium lining is still becoming thicker in the luteal phase. And then we get all over. So there's 4 phases in the menstrual cycle. Okay, so weer eens menstruasie. Dit is basies wanneer die endometrium wand afbreek en jy skei bloed en die weefsel af. En dit gebeur gewoonlik so vir dag 1 tot dag 7 of dag 10. Volgende fase is die follikulêre fase, waar jou eierselletjie ontwikkel. Dan gewoonlik dag 15 en dag 17 gebeur ovulasie. Dis wanneer die eierselletjie vrygestel word in die uterus in. Dit gaan van die eierstok deur die fallopiese buis in die uterus in. En dan gedurende die luteale fase is wanneer die endometriumwand nog steeds verdik en verdik. En dan gewoonlik na dag 28, rondom 28, begin die siklus heel van vooraf en dan begin menstruasie weer. Okay, so this basically is your menstrual cycle, but something happens at the same time. Okay, so the same time we also have the ovarian cycle, die ovariale cyclus. So again, it happens at the same time. You've got the same phases here, menstruation. So during menstruation, something's going to happen inside the ovary. Then again, during the follicular phase in the ovary, something's going to happen. And during ovulation, something's going to happen in the ovary. And then you have your luteal phase. Okay, so the two slides are connected. I hope you guys can see that. So also this from day 1, day 15, 17, ovulation is going to happen, and then day 28. Okay, so what's happened here during menstruation? You've got your young follicle with a young egg cell there in the inside, and it is still developing. Then during your follicular phase, this actually refers to the follicle now actually becoming very, very mature. So the follicular phase refers to this mature follicle. Then during ovulation happens, the follicle bursts open, there's the opening, and the egg cell is released into the fallopian tube, and then from the fallopian tube it goes to the uterus. Then during your luteal phase, we have the corpus luteum, so technically it actually refers to the corpus luteum as well. This prune-like structure that was the follicle, what's left of the follicle, now becomes this prune-like shape. It is still inside the ovary. So again, this will release progesterone into the woman's body. So then eventually it becomes smaller, and then it vanishes. So these side notes, the corpus albicans and so on, don't worry about the names. Just remember that this guy is called the corpus luteum. That's important. And it starts to vanish as the month further progresses to day 28. And then we start all over again from day 1. You start a new follicle and develop a new egg cell. Okay, so gedurende menstruasie, wat gebeur binne jou eierstokke, die ovariale siklus. Die eerste ding wat gebeur gedurende menstruasie is dat jy 'n nuwe follicle ontwikkel met 'n klein eierselletjie aan die binnekant. Hy begin ontwikkel en so aan. Dan tydens jou follikulêre fase, dit verwys na die ontwikkeling van die follicle, hy begin volwasse raak. En wanneer hy net mooi ryp en reg is, dan gedurende dag 15 na 17 kry ons ovulasie. En dit is wanneer die follicle oopbars en dan word die eierselletjie vrygestel en dan na die fallopiese buis toe en dan gaan hy na die uterus toe. En dan hierdie gedeelte van die follicle wat agterbly word dan opgekrimp en lyk soos 'n rosientjie-agtige struktuur en word die corpus luteum genoem. Jy hoef die naam te ken, die corpus albicans nie, is maar net soos hy begin verdwyn en klein word. Onthou maar net dat die corpus luteum kleiner en kleiner word en dan verdwyn hy later aan en dan begin ons weer van voor af. En dan onthou asseblief die funksie van jou corpus luteum is om progesteroon vry te stel in die liggaam in. Ons gaan later kyk van die hormone. Okay, so then again, at the same time as both these processes, the menstrual cycle and the ovarian cycle happens, we also have things happening with the hormones. Okay, so here I've got the names for you guys. LH refers to the luteinizing hormone, luteiniserende hormoon in Afrikaans, and FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulerende hormoon, die naam sê actually vir jou wat die funksie gaan wees. So it's four hormones, FSH, LH, and then we're going to look at estrogen and progesterone, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so again, at the same time, we've got these 4 phases. Something happens during menstruation, then the follicular phase with the hormones, then ovulation, and then the luteal phase. So around day 1 to day 7, during menstruation, what happens? You have usually high levels. The highest is FSH, so your follicle stimulating hormone. What does it do? It actually stimulates the body to start releasing and developing the follicle. Not really releasing, sorry, but more it starts to develop this new follicle. It goes through mitosis and starts going through meiosis. It wants to start developing so that the little egg cell inside the follicle can become mature so that eventually ovulation can happen. So the follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the production of a follicle. That's the function. So die follicle stimulerende hormoon stimuleer die ontwikkeling van 'n follicle. Okay, so it is high usually at the beginning of the month. Then usually the same levels you get of FSH and LH. So basically your FSH stimulates now the production of LH. It becomes higher eventually. So during a follicular phase, the FSH is still high because you want the follicle to start maturing. Then what LH does, the luteinizing hormone, it spikes over here during ovulation. Why does it spike? It spikes because FSH becomes a little bit higher, so now luteinizing hormone spikes, and what it does, it causes ovulation to happen. So LH, the luteinizing hormone, causes the release of the egg cell out of the follicle. Okay, so that's the function of LH, very, very important. That's why this guy spikes. So luteiniserende hormoon word hoër gedurende ovulasie, want dit wil hê dat die follicle moet oopbars en die eierselletjie vrystel na buite. Okay, then something else also happens. So you have your estrogen levels, quite normal for a woman. Then all of a sudden also starts spiking here during ovulation. So basically your estrogen also stimulates the release of your LH. So the estrogen also wants ovulation to happen. Then as soon as it becomes more, and ovulation has happened, it becomes a little less again, but this stimulates the production of progesterone. So progesterone is the yellow one. Sorry, the yellow one. The blue is the estrogen. So progesterone from here, the luteal phase, it's going to be the highest. And like I mentioned previously, progesterone is there to ensure that pregnancy happens. So it wants the young zygote to implant itself, and it wants the body to keep the little zygote there, because again, if progesterone isn't high, it actually causes, if it was low, say, it will cause a miscarriage, or the zygote will just exit the body. So progesterone is the one, they say, that implements pregnancy. Think P, progesterone, P, pregnancy. So progesterone is the one that ensures the pregnancy will happen. So again, if there was no fertilization happening and no implantation, it will come down again, meaning there is no thing, so nothing to be, there is no pregnancy happening, no zygote implantation, so it can go back to normal levels. It will only stay high if a woman is actually pregnant. And for 9 months long, progesterone levels will be very high to ensure the development of the fetus or the young baby. Okay, so dan gaan we alles in Afrikaans sê. En sy gepraat van die follikelstimulerende hormoon, aan die begin gaan dit hoog wees, want het wil hê dat die follikel moet oopbars, moet eintlik ontwikkel sodat daar nie oopbars, moet ontwikkel sodat die eierselletjie in die binnekant kan vergroot en volwasse word. Dan jou LH, luteiniserende hormoon, hy veroorsaak dat die selletjie uitkom, dat ovulasie gebeur, dat die follikel oopbars en dan die vrystelling van die eierselletjie gebeur. Estrogen oor die algemeen is baie gelyk, maar dit ook sal verhoog tydens jou ovulasie, want dit veroorsaak ook dat daar meer luteiniserende hormoon vrygestel word sodat ovulasie eintlik sal gebeur. En dan soos die estrogen vlakke ook verander, daarna gaan progesteroon dan verhoog, omdat die corpus luteum dit vrystel, en dit sal verhoog in die luteale fase, sodat dit die ontwikkelde fetus of die ontwikkelende embryo kan onderhou, sodat swangerskap kan aanhou. Indien swangerskap nie gebeur nie, indien die bevrugting moet gebeur het nie, daar is nie iets om te onderhou nie, sal progesteroon se vlakke weer na ruk teruggaan na normaal toe, want daar is nie 'n rede vir dit om hoog te wees nie, daar is geen babatjie wat ontwikkel nie. And basically at the end, then the entire cycle starts all over again. Okay, then I just want to show you guys, this basically shows us to sum up all three of these phases happens at the same time. So during menstruation happens in the uterus, the endometrium lining sheds, you have your hormone levels. FSH is going to be high, it's the red line, it's going to be high at the beginning, and your follicle is starting to develop. Then during your follicular phase, the follicle is maturing, LH is starting to become higher because of the elevated estrogen levels, and then the endometrium lining in the uterus is still thickening. During ovulation, LH spikes because estrogen spikes, and then ovulation happens there at the top in the ovary. Then in the luteal phase, your endometrium lining is still becoming thicker and thicker, but progesterone now is high because of the corpus luteum at the top there that has developed. So it releases progesterone. So what I want you guys to see is everything is connected, and this happens without our knowledge all at the same time. Okay, so net vinnig menstruasie gebeur in die uterus en op dieselfde tyd is jou FSH hoog want dit wil hê dat in die eierstok dat die follicle moet begin ontwikkel. En dan gedurende jou follikulêre fase kry jy jou volwasse follicle, maar tydens die tyd in die uterus verdik die endometriumwand, estrogen begin hoër word sodat LH ook kan begin hoër raak en tydens jou ovulasie gedeelte gebeur ovulasie, sodra LH verhoog, dan word daai eierselletjie vrygestel uit die follicle uit. Dan gedurende die luteale fase, jou endometriumwand nog al die pad verdik net die hele tyd. Progesteroon word nou hoër, die vlakke van progesteroon, omdat die corpus luteum nou heel bo in die eierstok ontwikkel het en dit nou vrystel, net vir ingeval bevrugting plaasgevind het om die babatjie te onderhou. Okay guys, and that is this lesson. Hopefully guys will get some homework as well to do.